make the condition right or wrong. So here we're going to go chapter 9. We have it's a long one, as some of these chapters are very, very long. Okay, chapter 9. If you say, here's a divorce document, we're divorced in 30 days. You become divorced only in 30 days. And this is similar to a condition, but it's also not a condition. It's similar condition because you set a time. So potentially what you did is you said, okay, you're going to get divorced in this amount of time, right? And then when we reach that time, you become divorced. And it's not a condition because it's you didn't make any condition. So therefore, when we said earlier in the laws of getting married that when you make a condition, you have to say it fully out. You have to say, if you do this, you will be divorced. If you don't do this, you will not be divorced. But if you give a divorce and you say you will be divorced with this document in 10 years or 10 days or whatever it is, then you don't have to go through all the laws of conditions. They will indeed be divorced in that time. For example, if you say this is your divorce document, you won't be divorced until 30 days. She's not divorced until after 30 days. And if he dies in the middle, then she will have not been divorced, right? So, if she died and didn't have kids, she'll have to marry the brother, levirate marriage. She didn't get divorced from him because he died between the 30 days.
Is a levirate marriage required?
When a person dies, and they don't have children, the wife is married, partially married to the levirate, to the other husband, to the brother. And therefore, now they can get out of it. There's something to do to get out of it, but they must do that to get out of it if they want to marry someone else.
Does she have to divorce the brother?
The second brother? Yeah, it's called chalitza. It's not really a divorce, but it's a kind of like.
Is it the sandal?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, it's a real thing. That's another thing. If you're a rabbi and you're marrying somebody, and you have a lady marrying, you have to make sure that none of her, you have to make sure that she had children or her husband had children or her previous husband, she's not partially married to somebody that she's never even thought about, because she might be. It's possible.
Is there, but wait, I have a brother. He's married. She's Jewish. When I die, Nancy's not.
If you have children, you're not in the levirate marriage. If you have children, only if you don't have children. Okay. So yeah, it is kind of an important question. It's rare that there's such a situation where a Jewish couple, no children, and she wants to get remarried, so she has to go through the chalitza process. That's the laws after the divorce, is the laws of levirate marriages. Okay.
Have you ever done one?
No, no. You need it's like a specialist thing. They have this old shoe that is a biblical shoe. It has to be done in a very, very, very particular way. It's an area of expertise. It's kind of like you don't usually see them around.
But Chabad holds with this.
Everyone has to do it. Everyone in Jude halacha holds of it. In other words, so if you marry off a lady, if a lady's getting married, besides looking into her genealogy, to confirm she's Jewish and confirm, all the different things. Ask her if she was ever married before, did she get halachically divorced, et cetera, et cetera. One thing, it's usually someone obvious. If she had children or he had children in that marriage, then she's not. She doesn't have to go into the levirate marriage. Which not, then it's something. Then it is something very important. Okay. So someone might be technically married to somebody else and not realize it, halachically. Okay.
Is that the real reason for all this, just to make sure that somebody's not
Well, no, that's just one.
accidentally married to
That's
someone
one
else?
area of detail. But if someone is accidentally married to someone else and they get married, then that is a problem. And they can't be married to the next person. So.
Just another stupid question. What if all of this happens and somebody realizes that they're or doesn't realize that they're still married? The rest of their lives are gonna think that they're married, and everybody else is gonna think that they're married.
So it has major.
The laws are quite complicated.
Yeah, it has major complications. If the lady will have children for the next marriage, then children will be bastards, and they won't be able to marry other Jews or other people nowadays.
But if nobody knows that, then
Correct. So it's really important to have when people get married, it's really important that they look into things properly and they make sure, confirm everything, because the repercussions may be very damaging for other people.
So these soldiers in Israel who are being killed, those who are married but don't have children, they're going to face this.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, there are different loopholes out of it, but potentially. And whatever, it's relatively rare that to do chalitza. It's relatively rare, but it happens once in a while. Okay. But that's the next set of laws. If somebody goes and they put the divorce document on the side of the public domain and it was stolen or lost, after 30 days she's divorced because the get existed on the day that she was divorced, and it was put in a place where it wouldn't necessarily get lost. Similarly, if he says, "I'm going to get married," and you're not divorced until you give me $200. She's only divorced after she gives the money, and he doesn't need to give a proper condition, because, as we said before, this is a different type of condition. And what's the difference between divorcing according to a Tanai, or after a Tanai is a condition, or a time of divorce, or something that she does? So the difference is if you divorce on condition, there's divorce, and it's not complete until the condition happens. And therefore, when the condition happens, she's divorced if the get is around, even though it's not in her domain. And she doesn't need to go and have it in her domain because she got it as a divorce. She just has to fulfill the condition. And if she marries we said if she marries before the condition happens, she doesn't have to leave that marriage. However, if you make the divorce dependent on a certain amount of time, or it's dependent on something that she does, so the divorce document is not divorced until that time. And therefore, when the time comes, she has to have the divorce document in her domain, or she has to go and re-get it from him, etc., and afterwards she's divorced. And if she's married before that time, she has to go out. If she gets pregnant during the time before the confirmation of the divorce, the child will be a bastard, because she is totally married until the time of the divorce document. That's said in the divorce document. We'll do one more. If he gives a get to a lady and he says to her, "If you don't give me $200, this is not this is not a divorce document, or you're not divorced." She is not. So he gives it to her. She's holding it, and then he says to her, "If you don't give it to me, so there's no divorce here. If you don't give me 200 zuz, this is not a get, or you are not divorced. If you don't give it to me, this is not. She's not divorced, and it's not a get. There's not a okay." If you want, so we'll stop here. But anyways, yeah. So nowadays they sometimes are conditions, but usually people try and avoid them because the difficulties involved. All right, we'll switch to Kitzur Shulchan Aruch.
Ivy asked me to ask you where the Torah and tea thing of Raka is.
It's in Paul's house. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
His house right down the street here.
Oh, the one up here?
Yeah.
What? Well,
Okay, so we're gonna go.
but we charge each student a fee to me.
So you're not allowed to be there?
Of course not, but I still get, but I was gonna owe me going to.
All right.
So what chapter are we in?
Chapter 15.
Right, what section?
Chapter 15, law number 5. What do you have?
4.
Number 4? We finished number 4. Yeah.
Okay.
So when we talked number 4, you said the minyan has to be in one room. If one guy's standing outside and he's not able to see them, he cannot join the minyan. But if he's standing outside and he hears them, then he can join. So as long as there's already a minyan. You have to be very careful to hear Kaddish, number 5. Tzarech lizar moed. You have to be very careful, lishmaya Kaddish, to listen to the Kaddish. Balan is achar of kavana, and to answer with concentration. And And how much more so in Amin Yishmer Haba? Shetzarach L'chavin Hetev, you have to have a lot of concentration. Shekol Amin Yishmer Haba, Kol Kanase. Anyone who says Amin Yishmer Haba with full concentration, Kairin like Zardina Shal Shivim Shana, he merits the decree of 70 years of evil is annulled on his behalf. So 70 years is King David says average lifespan. So okay. But Yesh Lanis is B'Kol Ram, you should say it out loud. Because with that voice of saying the Amen, when you say it out loud, it breaks all the heavenly prosecutors, and it takes away all the harsh decrees. You should not shout an unusually loud voice so that people should not ridicule him, and it will be causing him to sin. So it's interesting, in 770, the Rebbe always encouraged the kids to scream it. The Amen Yehesh Meira.
So it's an actual thing.
Yeah, well, you're supposed to say it loud. It says you shouldn't say it out loud, screaming it, but yeah, I mean, always then the kids were saying it out loud. Okay, Amen Yehesh Meira B'Im Tevas Yisbarach. One should say Yehesh Meira Varach Lo Maya Yisbarach. Here it says Yisbarach. That's the Ashkenazi way of pronouncing it. The Chabad way is Yisbarach. And after recitation, you should listen to the Chazin's recitation and say Amen after when the Chazan says the word Yisbarach. So there are different ways of doing that, but you say Amen Yehishmei Avar. Okay, so here he says you should say Amen when the Shliach Tzibur should say it a little. The Chazan should say it a little slower, and everyone should say Amen when he says.
Allowing enough time
Yeah.
for all this.
Okay, Yash Oimrim. There are those who say She'ein tzrich elam v'kadosh. There are those who say that you don't need to stand during Kaddish. Now, we're not talking about the people saying it, we're talking about the people listening. In Ashkenazi shuls, everyone stands during Kaddish. That's notable. In Sephardi shuls, they allow sitting. There are those who say She'ein tzrich elam v'kadosh. You don't need to stand in Kaddish. Now, there's the two types of Kaddish. There's the Kaddish that the Chazan, the leader, says, and there's the Kaddish that mourners say. So some say you don't need to stand. However, even those people that say you don't need to stand during Kaddish, if you are already standing, you are not allowed to sit for Kaddish. So if you are sitting, you can remain seated, according to some of those people. But if you are standing, you have to remain standing. You cannot sit during Kaddish. For example, after Hallel, everyone is standing during the Hallel prayer. There's a Kaddish at the end, so you're not allowed to sit during the Kaddish prayer. Ad la'achar Amen Yishmei Rabba, until after Amen Yishmei Rabba. V'yesh Oimrim, there are those who say Sheyesh Lamed Tamid l'Kaddish. There are those who say you always need to stand during Kaddish. V'lashar Davar Shebekdusha, and all holy things. All holy things you need to stand. V'yesh Lamed Bakal V'chayim Eglain Melech Moav. We can learn from Eglain, the king, the Moabite king, the Chsiv, the Ehud Ba'ilav, that Ehud came to him, Vayomer, Dvar Lekim Li Eilacha, Mayakam Yalkisi. He said, Ehud told him, to Eglon, the Moabite king, he said, I have a word for God for you, and he stood up. Ma Eglon Malch Mevin Shayakam. If Eglon, who was a idolater, he stood up, Kam L'Dvar Hashem, he stood up for the word of God. Kol Shkein Anachnu, how much more so do we, who are Jewish people, we need to stand up for it. V'chein Yesh Lachmir, and it is proper to follow the stringent opinion. So in all Ashkenazi shuls, they follow the opinion that you need to stand for Kaddish and Baruch Hu. And
Person is not.
now the Chabad tradition is if you're sitting, you can sit, but you can't sit down once Kaddish starts, or you can't sit down right before Kaddish. If you're already standing in the prayer, you have to stay standing.
But not required to stand specifically for the Kaddish.
Yeah,
You're
so.
not.
So that is, if you're already sitting, you're not specifically required to stand. But again, in Ashkenazi shuls, they all stand for it. That's the tradition. Okay. If there are not 9 people listening to the Chazan, so a minyan requires 10 people to listen. If there's not 9 people listening, Lo Yomer Klal Kaddish, you shouldn't say Kaddish at all. You cannot say any holy thing that is announced publicly without 10 people. What does 10 people mean? This is very important. 10 people means one person reciting and 9 listeners. However, if one of the 10 is praying Shemoneh Esrei, even though he cannot respond to the Kaddish, he can be part of the minyan. The same halacha applies in the case where there are 2, 3, or 4 of the minyan were praying Shemoneh Esrei. So as long as the majority is answering Amen, Ein Mi'iyut Ma'keves, the minority does not take away from the minyan. So for a minyan you need A, 10 men, and B, 9 answerers. You need 9 people to answer. Now what we said here is we said if up to 4 are in the Amida, 3 are in the Amida, right? So you'll have 1 guy leading it, 6 guys answering, and 3 guys in the Amida, that's okay. However, if one of them is sleeping, someone who's sleeping, so the 3 guys are doing something holy during the time of the Kaddish. But if one guy is sleeping,
So it's 9 listening.
you need 9
That's
listening.
'cause I'm crossing.
9 listening, but we said if 3 people are in doing something holy at the time, like Shemoneh Esrei, then they can be included in the 10.
Yeah, because it started out, I was thinking, well, you really need to have 11, but.
No, 9 answers and 1 guy leading.
Understood.
After the Chazan says half Kaddish, Omer B'Kol Ram. So this was, we were going in the order of the prayer. We were talking about Yishtabach. Remember, we said that if you only have 9 people, or if you don't have a minyan at Yishtabach, that ideally you should wait up to half an hour, right? So it's kind of funny. You can't talk during that time of prayer because you can't talk between the Baruch Shamar and the Amidah. So I guess everyone just sits quietly. They can read or something like that. If you're waiting half hour after, and you could wait half hour before Yishtabach and half hour after. So that's the limit of how long one should wait.
But you don't need a minyan for your shtaba.
You don't need a minyan for Yishtabach, but you need a minyan for the Kaddish and Baruch Hu after Yishtabach. And ideally, the Yishtabach should be said with a minyan. After the Chazan says the half Kaddish, Omer B'Kol Ram, he says out loud, Baruch Hu et Hashem Varach. And the congregation responds, Baruch Hashem Varach Le'olam Ved, V'ashlich Tzibur Chezram Gam Ken Baruch Hashem Varach Le'olam Ved. So he says, Baruch Hashem Varach. The community answers, Baruch Hashem Varach Le'olam Ved. This is in the Siddur. And then the Chazan repeats, Baruch Hashem Varach Le'olam Ved. Shalah Yotzi Es As Min HaKlal. It's not proper to exclude himself from the group. Shem Elam Baruch Hu, that I was saying Baruch Hu Einim Varach. Yeshna again. Some say that after the Chazan repeats Baruch Hashem and Varach Le'olam V'ed, everyone say Amen. But the Shliach Tzibur shouldn't say Amen after everybody else. We don't do that. If the Shliach chants a lengthy melody during the recitation of Baruch Hu, the congregation recites the prayer of Yizbarach. This is a short prayer in some Siddurim. Only while he's singing. When he says the words, while he's saying the words, if he's singing a nigun, a wordless melody in the Baruch Hu, there's a special prayer in some Siddurim. But they should not say that prayer while he is saying the prayer, while he's saying words. Let's say it's a really big synagogue and it's very loud. You can't hear the chazan, but you hear the people answering. This is very common in big synagogues, like giant synagogues. You can't hear the chazan, but you hear the people answering. Even though you didn't hear him prompt the prayer that you're saying, you can answer with everybody else. And the same with Kaddish. If you don't hear, like 770, for example, a lot of times you can't hear the chazan in a lot of the places. So what you just do is you just follow the crowd. And the crowd says Amen, so you can say Amen and Baruch Hu along with them. HaKadusha should be Yotzer. The Kadusha in Yotzer, Yishlahad Lamar B'tzibur, you should try and say it together. When we say Kadosh, 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 in the morning prayer, we should try and say it together. However, If you're not able to, you say it privately. Some people don't have the custom of saying it together at all.
Who's Yetzer?
Yotzer is the So Yotzer is the prayer after Yishtavach, the blessings of Shema. They start with a blessing called Yotzer, and that whole section is called the Yotzer.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah. All right. Now here's another interesting law. Let's say there's only 10 people exactly in the synagogue. You are not allowed to leave if there's only 10. And regarding the one who leaves, it says, those who forsake God will perish. But if there are 10, if there are 10, then the extras are allowed to leave. If they already heard Baruch Kedusha, and they heard all the Kaddishes and everything like that, then they could leave. If it occurred that they did leave in the middle of the prayers, and they're not 10 people, they can complete it without 10. There has to be the majority of minyan left. However, the section that had been started with 10 as follows. Okay, so here's the way it works. If 10 people leave in the middle of a certain part of prayer, you can finish that part of prayer. You can't go further. No. So if you're doing the repetition of the Amidah and someone leaves and there's still 6 people, you can do the repetition, but you can't do the Kaddish right after, because the Kaddish right after is new, it's a separation. You could say the prayer, there's 2 prayers of the Kohanim. There's the prayer that the Kohanim say we only do it on holidays, and there's the prayer that the Chazan says on behalf of the Kohanim. Then, so if the minyan left, you don't do the prayer of the Kohanim leading, you do the prayer the Chazan says the Kohen prayer, because when the Kohanim lead, it's no longer considered part of the Amidah. That's like a separate mitzvah. So you can finish off whatever you started with a minyan, but you cannot go to the next section. You cannot. That doesn't qualify for a minyan in the same next section. If you began the Torah reading and there were 10 people, and some left, you can finish the Torah reading and you can say the Hav Kaddish. You cannot add v'gam in koren l'mafter. You also don't read the mafter. El ha'achron shemaminyan akurim kores haftarah. B'loi brachas. So every Shabbos we read 8 aliyahs. There's 7, and then the 8th one is a repetition of the last 3 verses, and that's the haftarah. What if a minyan leaves in the middle? So then you can finish it. What do? You finish the Torah reading, and you say Kaddish, and then you don't read the repetition, the maftir, or even if it's Rosh Chodesh or Chanukah, you don't read the extra part, and the 7th guy reads the Haftorah without blessings. You can't make the blessings without a minyan of the Haftorah.
But did you read the Haftorah?
So you read the Haftorah without blessings.
You can read a Haftorah without a minyan?
Without blessings. It's not really considered the reading of the Haftorah.
It's just a reading.
But like you could read it. You could read the Haftorah without. You could read the Haftorah without any time. We could read the Haftorah now.
Right.
But it's traditional though to specifically read the Haftorah. You shouldn't say we don't have a minyan. We don't do anymore. You should read the Haftorah, but the 7th guy should read it.
Well, can I ask a question? What I find curious is there's no minyan required for Shema.
Correct.
Shema, we can say we are required actually.
And actually, it's traditional to sit during the Shema. That's another interesting thing.
And yet, there are so many other things that do require a minyan. Like Kaddish, you cannot say Kaddish privately. I couldn't sit at home and recite the Kaddish. I mean, I could read it, but it wouldn't mean the same.
Correct.
It requires a minyan.
Correct.
I find it curious that Shema is a very important, it's our declaration of faith. And yet, it seems like it has I hate to say this, but a lower status than say Baruch Hu, or repetition of the Amidah or Kaddish. Is there a discussion?
Well, so I think the outlook is slightly different. Kaddish is not a prayer, and we need a minyan to say it. Kaddish is the prayer you say when there's a minyan. The repetition of the Amidah is not, oh, a prayer, too bad we can't do it. That might be what we say. But the repetition of the Amidah is actually a prayer which we do when we have a minyan. So Shema is a prayer we do whether we have a minyan or not. Kaddish is the expression of the minyan. So
It's required by the minyan.
So in other words, it's not like, oh, we want to say Kaddish, we need a minyan to say Kaddish. It's really, the origin of Kaddish is, we have a minyan. What should we do with this minyan? Let's proclaim the holiness of God through Kaddish. So, in other words, the context of Kaddish is, that's why if you don't have a minyan, you can't say Kaddish. It's because the origin of Kaddish, where the rabbis were saying, hey, that's pretty cool, you got 10 people, why don't you do something together? Let's write this prayer that we do when we have a minyan.
So I understand that. So you could say, reverse my question and say, well, why is it that we don't proclaim a minyan by saying Shema?
So now Shema is a mitzvah in the Torah, biblical mitzvah to say in the Torah, regardless of minyan or not. The rabbis were the ones who enacted the minyan. So the Shema, the origin of the Shema is, you got to say Shema, whether you're in a minyan or not. The origin.
We say Shema during our daily prayers.
Yeah, correct, and you say it even if you're at home. Yeah. So
Right.
the Kaddish is the rabbis. It's part of the mechanism of minyan, is Kaddish. So in other words, like when we say we need to say Kaddish, I need to say Kaddish. Have a yard site. It's technically not contextually how Kaddish, what Kaddish really is. Really, it's like we have a minyan. What do we need to do now that we have a minyan? Now that you have a minyan, you have to say Kaddish. Shema's origin is in the Bible. It doesn't say anything about minyan. It just says that we need to say Shema every day as individual. The mitzvah of Shema is in the Torah pre the discussion of minyan. Kaddish is post discussion of minyan. Like in other words, there are several things which are so what's more important, Shema or Kaddish? Absolutely Shema. The Shema is more important because that's a mitzvah in the Torah.
How did Kaddish come to be associated with mourning?
The Kaddish came from the Zohar when Rabbi Akiva saw this soul that was damaged, and he asked the soul, what could you do? And he said, have my son say Kaddish. Now remember, most Kaddishes, a lot of the Kaddishes are said by the Chazan.
Chatzi Kaddish.
Chatzi Kaddish and Kaddish Shalim, they're said by the complete Kaddish, and they're said by the Chazan. So Kaddish probably existed before, and Kaddish was a minyan thing. And then Rabbi Akiva added in the Zohar from the story, he said that in order to repair souls in heaven, if a child says Kaddish, that repairs the soul in heaven. So in other words, in addition to the Kaddish during prayer, when you have a minyan, the child should say Kaddish, and that helps repair the soul. So that's the origin of Kaddish. It's interesting how if you look at Kaddish, it's not really doesn't have any memorial.
Right.
Now it's interesting to me always. The memorial prayers are basically all ancient Jewish memorial prayers are much newer than the Kaddish. They're from the Middle Ages, and they're all basically I'm going to give money. They're all I swear I'll give money on behalf of. I'm taking an oath to give money. Well, bli neder, I'm going to give money. So the Kaddish isn't really a memorial prayer, but that's how it came about. So in other words, if you're thinking about it, Rabbi Akiva is getting from the soul is telling him in the Zohar, the soul is telling him, take the Kaddish prayer, which is said with a minyan, and have a child say it. Don't just say it without a child. Have a child say it because there's a side benefit to the soul of a child saying it.
So not to belabor it, but Kaddish then fulfills multiple roles or multiple functions within the liturgy. You have the Reader's Kaddish, both the shorter and the longer version. You have the Mourner's Kaddish. You have Kaddish de Rabbanan, and they all require a minyan.
Yeah, so they are all enactments of minyan. In other words, when you have a minyan, this is what you do. And the fact that a mourner says it was added by Rabbi Akiva in the Zohar. In other words, he got some inside information from heaven that if instead of getting a regular guy to say certain Kaddishes, if a mourner says it, it's good for the mourner's parents.
So it'd be, so to modify what I was saying before, it seems odd then for that we have the Shema, it's a biblical command, which it's our declaration of faith in God. But the mourner's prayer, a mourner's declarations for the departed requires a minyan and is also, the text of it fulfills other functions within the liturgy. There's not a specific designated mourner's prayer.
Correct.
It's that the Kaddish.
Correct. And
According
imagine we lived in the times of Rabbi Akiva, so mourners weren't saying Kaddish. The Chazan was saying Kaddish. And then Rabbi Akiva comes and he's a Kabbalist and he says, no, I just came from heaven. I spoke to the soul over there, and from now on, mourners would say Kaddish. Should say Kaddish.
Yeah.
There were likely some pushback. There were probably some people who said, hey, this is a new custom. Kaddish is the minyan declaration. When you have a minyan, this is what you do. You say Kaddish. Why are you mixing in mourners? And he says, oh, it's a spiritual reason. I have this story. That's likely how it enacted. I don't know if there was pushback. I'm sure Rabbi Akiva is one of the greatest sages. Everybody trusted Rabbi Akiva. But
How long is somebody considered to be a mourner?
11 months.
11 months. And going back to the repetition of the Amida, do we never say it if there's not a minyan, or are there conditions that we could do a repetition without a minyan?
We only say it with a minyan.